There was a time when monsters had to earn their existence. Let me say that again. There was a time when monsters had to earn their existence. Their stories spread slowly, from village to village, from whisper to whisper. They needed literal generations to grow teeth. And now? A shadow in the woods can become a legend before sunrise. A blurry photo can become evidence by lunchtime. A Reddit post can become memory by the end of the week. The strangest part, we don't even notice it happening. We think we're just scrolling. Tonight, on the Midnight Drive, we're not talking about ghosts. No, we are talking about the machine that builds them. Before the internet, a monster had to travel on foot. It moved in whispers, in letters, in warnings spoken at the edge of a field before dusk. It required breath. It required memory. It required a teller and a listener standing in the same physical space. A story began small. Someone heard something in the woods. Someone saw a figure near the river. Someone claimed a shape stood at the foot of their bed. And that story would spread carefully, slowly, from one household to another. But it could not outrun geography. It belonged somewhere. The woman in white belonged to that bridge. The phantom carriage belonged to that road. The strange lights belonged to that hill. Folklore was anchored in literal locations. You could point it out on a map, and because it moved slowly, it evolved slowly. Details changed over the years. Names shifted over decades. Motives blurred over generations. Sometimes the monster softened. Sometimes it grew teeth. But it always remained tethered to a literal location. That tether matters. Because when a story belongs to a location, it gains weight. You can visit the forest. You can stand at the crossroads. You can touch the cold stone where something was seen. A literal place creates gravity. It forces a legend to develop roots. Now let's think about some of the cases that we've covered on the show. Cannock Chase, a specific forest in Staffordshire, with trails, with history, with fog that settles low over it. Rosenheim, a law office, a building with walls and wiring and recorded documentation. Randonautica, specific coordinates, a shoreline, a physical suitcase on physical rocks. Even sleep paralysis. it might not be literally location-based, but it is body-based. And with it being body-based, that also makes it an anchored to a state experience. All of these stories have structure, and they all have containment. Now, let's remove that containment. Remove the geography. Remove the slow movement of oral transmission. Remove the friction that once required time. And what happens? A story no longer needs to travel by horse, or by rumor, or by candlelight. It travels by push notification. It travels by scrolling. And once you remove all elements of friction, you also remove all elements of resistance. The internet did something folklore had never experienced before. It completely dissolved borders. Now, a legend can exist everywhere simultaneously. Just imagine. It can originate in a bedroom in Ohio, be edited in London, be debated in Manila, and be believed wholeheartedly in Melbourne, all before the sun has fully set over the course of a day. There is no local anymore. There is only viral. And when a story like this goes viral, it doesn't settle. It accelerates. The Backrooms did not begin in a forest. They began in a comment section. An image posted online, fluorescent lighting, endless yellow corridors. A caption that suggested accidental entry into another level of reality. That was enough. No coordinates, no map, no town hall, just repetition. Slender Man did not emerge from a centuries-old European tale. He emerged from a Photoshop contest. 2 altered images. A tall, faceless figure added in the background. A fictional backstory layered in for atmosphere. And then the comments began. Then the art. Then the sightings. And then the testimonies. Within months, Slender Man felt old. Within a year, he felt established. His story felt timeless. That compression of time is unprecedented. What once required generations now requires engagement. And engagement moves faster than folklore ever could. But here's the subtle shift. When stories used to move slowly, people forgot about the inconsistencies. The details blurred. Contradictions dissolved. And now, every version of the story in question is archived. Every clip is screen recorded. Every retelling of the story exists simultaneously. And yet somehow the legend continues to harden. It still stabilizes. It still feels cohesive. Because the internet doesn't just spread stories, it reinforces them. And that reinforcement is where modern mythology begins. In our next segment tonight, we're going to be talking about how the internet has accelerated and amplified stories into modern day folklore. If you'd like to join the conversation, go ahead and send us a text or leave us a message on our hotline, 402-610-2836. You're listening to The Midnight Drive. Acceleration changes everything. Folklore once required time to harden. Now, it requires traction to continue to stay relevant. And that traction is measurable. Views, shares, comments, watch time, completion rate. The modern legend does not evolve by retelling. It evolves by performance. Let's return to Randonautica for just a moment. A group of teenagers follow coordinates to a beach. They find a suitcase. Inside are human remains. The event is tragic. It is real. It is documented. But within hours of the footage circulating, something begins to shift. The headline version spreads first, then the interpretation version, then the optimized version. The intention becomes darker in retellings. The coincidence becomes implication. The implication becomes suggestions. And suggestion is powerful because suggestion invites engagement. $1 million question in the Randonautica story. What did they set the intention to? Did they set their intention to death? That question alone generates comments, debates, reactions. And reaction is fuel. The algorithm never asks, is this accurate? It asks, is this compelling? Is this keeping people here? Is this making them respond? Is this making them stay? Fear is sticky. Ambiguity is sticky. Mystery is sticky. The more unresolved a story is, the more it performs. And the better it performs, the more it spreads. This is not conspiracy. It's all by design. Platforms are engineered for engagement. Engagement thrives on emotional charge. Emotional charge thrives on uncertainty. So, uncertainty rises. Now I want you to imagine a blurry video. A white shape between trees. It's grainy. It's shaky. It was posted exactly at midnight. The caption of the video reads, "I can't explain what we saw." That sentence alone does half of the work, because now it invites the audience to fill in the blank. And once an audience fills in a blank, they feel ownership. Ownership creates loyalty. Loyalty creates defense. And defense creates belief. This is exactly how acceleration becomes reinforcement. A single clip becomes 10 reaction videos. Those reaction videos become breakdowns. Those breakdowns become explainers. The explainers become compilations. Within a week, you can search the topic and find 100 confirmations. Not because 100 events happened, because one event was amplified 100 times. And repetition feels like validation. If you scroll and see the same figure across multiple accounts, your brain flags it as a pattern. Pattern implies presence. Presence implies legitimacy. Even when the origin was ambiguous. This is exactly how the Backrooms exploded. One image, one caption. Then people began creating maps, levels, entities, rules. Soon, there were walkthrough videos, lore explanations, found footage simulations. The legend did not grow slowly. It scaled ridiculously fast. Scaling changes perception. When something scales quickly, it feels bigger than it actually is. It feels established. It feels older than it actually is. And here's where acceleration becomes something else. It becomes compression. Time compresses. What used to take 50 years now takes 5 days. Which means myths are forming faster than we can analyze them. Before skepticism shows up, the narrative has already hardened. Before correction spreads, the optimized version has already embedded itself. Think about how many times you've heard a detail repeated that later turned out to be incorrect. But by the time it was corrected, it felt too familiar to fully discard. That familiarity matters. Familiarity breeds comfort. Comfort breeds acceptance. And acceptance builds mythology. The internet has removed the incubation period. There is no waiting stage, no quiet simmer. There's only ignition. And the ignition is loud. So now we're living in a world where folklore does not require time. It requires metrics. And metrics reward what moves people quickly. Fear moves people quickly. Mystery moves people quickly. Ambiguity moves people quickly. This definitely does not mean the stories are false. It simply means the velocity is artificial. The artificial velocity changes how we interpret weight. A legend that takes centuries feels earned. A legend that takes 48 hours feels explosive. But both can feel real because both are repeated. And repetition is the skeleton of belief. In our next segment, we're going to be getting into the psychology of how all of these patterns work inside of our brains. If you'd like to join the conversation, go ahead and add a comment wherever you're listening, on whatever platform you're listening. We'll do our best to get to all of them. If you want to talk to us or leave a message, call the hotline 402-610-2836. 402-610-2836. You're listening to The Midnight Drive. Welcome back to the Midnight Drive. Tonight, we're talking all about modern day mythology and folklore and how the internet has changed the way and the speed that it spreads. In this segment, we're going to be talking about the psychology of patterns. Here's the part that makes modern mythology so effective. It's not just the internet spreads stories quickly. It's that the stories that are spreading are designed to fit perfectly into the architecture of the human mind. Not consciously, not by a single person in a room planning it, but entirely by selection. The versions that fit our mind best are the versions that survive. And the internet is an environment where survival is measured in attention. Humans are pattern detectors. That is not a metaphor. That's the job description. Our brains are constantly scanning for meaning. Not because we're spiritual, not because we're gullible, but because our ancestors, who missed patterns, got eaten. In the wild, it's safer to mistake a shadow for a predator than to miss a predator hiding in a shadow. So, we over-detect. We would rather be wrong than be late. That's why a forest at night feels different. The same trees, the same trail, the same air, but our mind changes what it does with the information. In daylight, the brain relaxes. In darkness, the brain begins to narrate. It fills gaps. It connects dots. It starts building its own story. Now, add a device to your hand, a screen, a feed, and a story that you saw earlier that day. A girl with black eyes in Cannock Chase, a tall figure in your doorway, a hallway that feels a little too empty and a little too bright. You don't need to believe these stories for them to prime you. Priming itself is not belief. Priming is readiness. Your brain is being prepared to notice certain shapes, certain themes, certain signals. If you spend an hour watching videos about the Hat Man, and then you wake up in the night paralyzed, your brain has an available template. It has an image all ready to drop into that gap. That's not supernatural. That's cognition. In sleep paralysis, your body is still in a dreaming state, but your mind is awake enough to interpret. So, it begins to interpret. And that often interprets through fear. Fear is the default narrator. Now let's talk about the backrooms. Why do the backrooms get under people's skin? Because it feels familiar. It resembles offices, schools, hotels, waiting rooms, spaces that you yourself have been in, half awake, late at night. And because it feels familiar, it feels possible. And possibility is the doorway fear walks through. Oh, and Randonautica. Randonautica is the cleanest example of this mechanism. It literally tells you to set an intention. And then it sends you somewhere random. And when you arrive, Your mind does exactly what it's built to do. It looks for the intention. If you set your intention as red, the color red, you will notice all of the red things around you when you arrive at the coordinates. If you set it as loss, you will notice symbols of absence. And if you set it as danger, you will notice threat. You will feel threatened in some way, shape, or form at your coordinates. It's not because the universe changed. It's because your attention changed. Attention is like a flashlight. And attention can make anything look meaningful. The same object can be trash one day, and suddenly, the next day, it's an omen of some sort. Depending, of course, on what you were looking for. There's a reason myths are full of repetition. 3 knocks, 3 warnings. On the 3rd night, repetition feels significant. And the internet is built on repetition. If you scroll long enough, you will see the same structure again and again and again and again. A hook, a reveal, a reaction, a comment section of people confirming it. Your brain reads that confirmation is social proof, and social proof is so powerful. After all, we are social animals. If a crowd reacts with fear, you become more alert. If a crowd reacts with certainty, you lead toward belief. This is where the internet becomes more than a platform. It becomes an environment that trains perception. It teaches you what to look for, what to fear, what to interpret as a sign. And then something even stranger happens. Memory begins to shift. You don't remember the story as you originally heard it. You remember the most repeated version of it, the most dramatic version of it, the version the comments insisted were true. Memory itself is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you recall an event, you rebuild it. And rebuilding is vulnerable to influence. That's why Mandela effects feel so eerie. Not because reality is glitching, but because memory is communal now. It's shaped in public. It's edited in comment sections. You remember something one way, then you see 1,000 people remember it differently, and your brain begins to doubt its own footage. Now, take that same mechanism and apply it to folklore. A person posts a story. 10 people repeat it with slight changes. 100 people repeat it with confidence. Soon the detail that was never confirmed becomes fixed. Not because it was proven, because it was repeated. This is how the Seattle suitcase story gained fictional intentions. This is how Cannock Chase becomes a portal zone instead of a haunted forest. This is how the Hat Man becomes a universal entity instead of a neurological state. It's not that these ideas are impossible, it's that they're sticky. They fit the mind, they fit fear, they fit narrative, and because they fit, they spread. So when you ask, why do modern myths feel so real, part of the answer is unsettling. They feel real because they are built out of the parts of you that cannot stop building meaning. Your brain is the factory. The internet just supplies raw material, and then it distributes the product back to everyone else. And once enough people share the same product, it becomes culture. It becomes atmosphere. It becomes something you feel, even if you never believed it, because you live inside it now. You're listening to the midnight drive. We used to gather around fires, campfires. That's how all of this started. Long before fiber optics, long before streaming, long before comment sections. All we needed was a circle, a flame, and darkness just beyond the edge of light. Stories lived inside that circle. Ghosts were told. Warnings were given. Children were reminded not to wander too far. The fire flickered. The wood stayed dark. And eventually, the fire went out. The fear had boundaries. Now, the fire never goes out, though, does it? It's in your pocket, on your nightstand, beside your bed. It suddenly glows at 2:17 a.m. when the house is quiet, when your thoughts are slower, when your guard is down. But instead of one storyteller, there are literally millions. Instead of one voice lowering in the dark, there's a feed that never, ever ends. The internet did not invent fear, but it certainly industrialized it. It systematized it. It built pathways for it. And it certainly made sure that once a fear performs well, that it is fed right back to you again and again and again and again. You might scroll past a story about a black-eyed child. You hesitate. Half a second longer than normal. That hesitation is recorded. You watch a Backrooms clip until the end. That completion is recorded. You replay a Randonautica video because the ending unsettled you. That replay is recorded. The machine doesn't ask you why you lingered. It simply makes a note that you did, and it adjusts. The next night, your feed is slightly darker. Not dramatically, just slightly. More liminal spaces. More unexplained footage. More shadowy figures. Not enough to alarm you. Just enough to keep you curious. After all, curiosity is a doorway. And fear walks easily through curiosity. None of this is horror in the traditional sense. There's no villain, no mastermind, no hooded figure in a control room. There's only optimization, a system learning what keeps you watching. And what keeps humans watching consistently is unresolved tension, ambiguity, mystery, the possibility that something is just outside of understanding. Think about that for a moment. The most ancient part of your brain is wired to scan for threat and uncertainty. And the most modern system on the planet is wired to maximize uncertainty because it increases engagement. Those two mechanisms fit together too well. So, modern mythology does not need a witch in the woods anymore. It needs a blurry video, a suggestive caption, 1,000 comments asking, "Did anyone else see that?" It needs repetition. It needs community. It needs consensus. And once it has consensus, it has weight. it has validity, even if the origin was completely accidental. And that's not even the unsettling part. Here's the unsettling part. You are not just consuming these myths, you are participating in their construction. Every like, every share, every moment you pause. You are voting, not on truth, but on resonance. And resonance determines survival. In older folklore, stories survived because they were retold. Now, they survive because they are reacted to. Reaction is the new retelling. And reaction leaves data. Data leaves patterns. Patterns are studied. Studied patterns are reinforced. So what we're witnessing is not just the spread of modern-day ghost stories. It's the emergence of a self-reinforcing, myth-making engine. One that operates continuously, silently, no sleep required. And here's where it becomes existential, because folklore used to reflect the fears of a community. Now, folklore is shaped by a system that can detect fear at scale. Not in one village, in millions, simultaneously. It sees what makes all of us uneasy, what makes us all linger, and what makes us all return. And it supplies more of it, not maliciously, not personally, just efficiently. We used to ask, what if something is watching us from the dark? Now we willingly hold something that watches us to the glow of our own faces. Not to harm us, but to learn us, to measure our hesitations, to catalog our curiosity, to refine what unsettles us. And once you realize that, the ghost story shifts. Because maybe the most powerful myth of the modern world is not the black-eyed child, not the Hat Man, not the endless yellow corridor, but rather the belief that the feed is passive, that it simply reflects what exists, when in reality it selects, it amplifies, it shapes. If enough people are shown the same ambiguity, it begins to feel like presence. If enough people react the same way, it begins to feel like confirmation. And once something feels confirmed, it becomes part of the atmosphere. You don't have to believe it. You just have to live in a world where it is constantly referenced. 40 years ago, a child in the woods was a local legend. Now a child in the woods can trend globally overnight. The difference is not the darkness. It's the distribution. So when you hear a story now, when you see a clip that unsettles you, when a pattern feels too consistent to ignore, ask yourself one quiet question. Is this a haunting? Or is this a feedback loop? Because the campfire never goes out. It glows. It studies. It adjusts. You've been listening to The Midnight Drive.